indescribably sweet fragrance, lifting their heads in varied contour, one pyramidal, another a truncated cone, one table-topped, another ridgy like the steep roof of a church, one a glorious heave with an even outline, another jagged and savage, interested us considerably, and the pretty pictures, exquisitely pretty, at the head of the several bays evoked many an exclamation of admiration. It was the most natural thing in the world that I should feel deepest admiration for these successive pictures of quiet, scenic beauty, but the Doctor had quite as much to say about them as I had myself, though, as one might imagine, satiated with pictures of this kind, far more beautiful, far more wonderful, he should long ago have expended all his powers of admiring scenes in nature. From Bagamoyo to Ujiji I had seen nothing to compare to them. None of these fishing settlements, under the shade of a grove of palms and plantations, banyans and mimosa, with cassava gardens in the right and left of palmy forests, and patches of luxuriant grain looking down upon a quiet bay, whose calm waters at the early morn reflected the beauties of the hills, which sheltered them from the rough and boisterous tempest that so often blew without. The fishermen evidently think themselves comfortably situated. The lake affords them all the fish they require, more than enough to eat, and the industrious a great deal to sell. The steep slopes of the hills, cultivated by the housewives, contribute plenty of grain, such as doura and Indian corn, besides cassava, groundnuts or peanuts, and sweet potatoes. The palm trees afford oil, and the plantains an abundance of delicious fruit. The ravines and deep gullies supply them with the tall shapely trees from which they cut out their canoes. Nature has supplied them bountifully with all that a man's heart or stomach can desire. It is while looking at what seems both externally and internally complete and perfect happiness that the thought occurs, how must these people sigh when driven across the dreary wilderness that intervenes between the lake country and the sea coast, for such homes as these. Those unfortunates who, bought by the Arabs for a couple of doti, are taken away to Zanzibar to pick cloves, or to do hamal work. As we drew near Niasanga, our second camp, the comparison between the noble array of picturesque hills and receding coves, with their pastoral and agricultural scenes, and the shores of old Pontus, was very great. A few minutes before we hauled our canoe ashore, two little incidents occurred. I shot an enormous dog-faced monkey, which measured from nose to end of tail 4 feet 9 inches. The face was 8½ inches long. Its body weighed about 100 pounds. It had no mane or tuft at the end of the tail, but the body was covered with long, wiry hair. Numbers of these specimens were seen, as well as of the active cat-headed and longer-tailed smaller ones. The other was in sight of a large lizard, about 2 foot 6 inches long, which waddled into cover before we had well noticed it. The Doctor thought it to be the Monitor terrestris. We encamped under a banyan tree. Our surroundings were the now light grey waters of the Tanganyika, an amphitheatral range of hills, and the valley of Niasanga, situated at the mouth of the rivulet Niasanga, with its grove of palms, thicket of plantains, and plots of grain and cassava fields. Near our tent were about half a dozen canoes, large and small, belonging to the villagers. Our tent door fronted the glorious expanse of fresh water, inviting the breeze, and the views of distant Ugoma and Ukaramba, and the island of Muzimu, whose ridges appeared of a deep blue colour. At our feet were the clean and well-washed pebbles, borne upward into tiny lines and heaps by the restless surf. A search amongst these would reveal to us the material of the mountain heaps, which rose behind us and to our right and left. There was schist, conglomerate sandstone, a hard white clay, an ochreish clay containing much iron, polished quartz, etc. Looking out of our tent, we could see a line on each side of us of thick, tall reeds, which formed something like a hedge between the beach and the cultivated area around Niasanga. Among birds seen here, the most noted were the merry wagtails, which are regarded as good omens and the messengers of peace by the natives, and any harm done to them is quickly resented, and is fineable. Except to the mischievously inclined, they offer no inducement to commit violence. On landing, they flew to meet us, balancing themselves in the air in front, within easy reach of our hands. The other birds were crows, turtle doves, fish hawks, kingfishers, ibis nigra and ibis religiosa, flocks of whydah birds, geese, darters, paddy birds, kites, and eagles. At this place the Doctor suffered from dysentery. It is his only weak point, he says, and, as I afterwards found, it is a frequent complaint with him. Whatever disturbed his mind, or any irregularity in eating, was sure to end in an attack of dysentery, which had lately become of a chronic character. The third day of our journey on the Tanganika brought us to Zassi River and village, after a 4 hours' pull. Along the line of road, the mountains rose 2,000 and 2,500 feet above the waters of the lake. I imagined the scenery getting more picturesque and animated at every step, and though it is far lovelier than anything seen near Lake George or on the Hudson. The cozy nooks at the head of the many small bays constitute most admirable pictures, filled in as they were with the ever beautiful feathery palms and broad green plantain fronds. These nooks have all been taken possession of by fishermen, and their conically beehive shaped huts always peep from under the frondage. The shores are thus extremely populous. Every terrace, small plateau, and bit of level ground is occupied. Zassi is easily known by a group of conical hills which rise near by, and are called Kirasa. Opposite to these, at a distance of about a mile from shore, we sounded and obtained 35 fathoms, as on the previous day. Getting out a mile further, I let go the whole length of my line, 115 fathoms, and obtained no bottom. In drawing it up again, the line parted, and I lost the lead, with 3/4 of the line. The Doctor stated, apropos of this, that he had sounded opposite the lofty Kabogo, south of Ujiji, and obtained the great depth of 300 fathoms. He had also lost his lead in 100 fathoms of his line, but he had nearly 900 fathoms left, and this was in the canoes. We hope to use this long sounding line in going across from the eastern to the western shore. On the fourth day we arrived in Nyabigma, a sandy island in Urundi. We had passed the boundary line between Ujiji and Urundi half an hour before arriving at Nyambigma. The Mshala River is considered by both nations to be the proper divisional line, though there are parties of Warundi who have emigrated beyond the frontier into Ujiji. For instance, the Mutwari and villagers of the populous Kagunga, distant an hour north from Zassi. There are also several small parties of Wajiji who have taken advantage of the fine lands in the deltas of the Kasokwi, Namusinga, and Lauba rivers, the first two of which enter the Tanganika in this bay, near the head of which Nyabigma is situated. From Nyabigma, a pretty good view of the deep curve in the great mountain range which stretches from Cape Kazinga and terminates at Cape Kasofu may be obtained, a distance of 20 or 25 miles. It is a most imposing scene, this great humpy, ridgy, and irregular line of mountains. Deep ravines and chasms afford outlets to the numerous streams and rivers which take their rise in the background. The pale fleecy ether almost always shrouds its summit. From its base extends a broad alluvial plain, rich beyond description, teeming with palms and plantains, and umbrageous trees. Villages are seen in clusters everywhere. Into this alluvial plain run the Luaba or Ruaba River on the north side of the Cape Kitunda, and the Kasokwi, Namsinga, and Mshala rivers on the south side of the cape. All the deltas of rivers emptying into the Tanganika are hedged in on all sides with a thick growth of matete, a gigantic species of grass, and papyrus. In some deltas, as that of Luamba and Kasokwe, morasses have been formed in which the matete and papyrus jungle is impenetrable. In the depths of them are quiet and deep pools, frequented by various aquatic birds, such as geese, ducks, snipes, widgeons, kingfishers and ibis, cranes and storks, and pelicans. To reach their haunts is, however, a work of great difficulty to the sportsman in quest of game, a work often attended with great danger, from the treacherous nature of these morasses, as well as from the dreadful attacks of fever which in these regions invariably follow wet feet and wet clothes. At Nyabigma we prepared by distributing 10 rounds of ammunition to each of our men for a tussle with the Warundi of 2 stages ahead, should they invite it by a too forward exhibition of their prejudice to strangers. At dawn of the 5th day we quitted the haven of Nyambigma Island, and in less than an hour had arrived off Cape Kitunda. This cape is a low platform of conglomerate sandstone, extending for about 8 miles from the base of the great mountain curve which gives birth to the Luaba and its sister streams. Crossing the deep bay, at the head of which is the delta of the Luaba, we came to Cape Kasofu. Villagers are numerous in this vicinity. From hence we obtained a view of a series of points or capes, Kigongo, Katunga, and Baguluka, all of which we passed before